Good afternoon, ladies. Welcome to the world of women's work, breaking barriers to equity in North Carolina. I am Fontella McKire, council member and also director of workforce development with SHRMCO, a social implementation strategy group in Charlotte. I'm thinking about just the topics of today that we've covered, right? And so before I dive in, quick housekeeping, just to help us with our time. We got an aggressive agenda, a lot of things we want to talk about, and only really 30 minutes to do it. So in the space, there are individuals that have note cards. And so we really want to invite you to write any questions that you may have down so that we can filter those and ensure that your voice is entered into the space. All right, so cards are gonna flow. I wanna start by introducing our panel. I know a little different flow than what we've had thus far, but I do feel it's important to bring the individuals into the space, into the conversation, allow you to hear their voices with regards to who they are, why this topic is important, and why they chose to devote an hour of their time on today in particular to talk about this topic. And so I'll start far in, Charlotte City Council member Marjorie Molina from the Queen City representing. And then we have Tracy Newkirk, who's the CEO of Genesis Block out of Wilmington. And then Representative Julie Von Hafen, state representative, you heard a lot about her today and lifted up at the stage from different speakers. And then lastly, but not least, Anna Pardo, who is the Workers' Rights Project co-director of NC Justice Center. I am truly honored to be joined by such an esteemed group of women subject matter expertise. And now I have to this is my quick disclaimer. When I thought about the topic, and as we were doing prep, and given all the things that we've heard about women's work and how people tend to box us in, don't get caught up on the title. We're really going to focus in on the barriers and how we break through those barriers through today's conversation. So with that, I'd like to invite our panelists, starting with Council Member Molina, to just share a little bit. Why is this topic important to you?
First off, good afternoon to everyone who took the time to be here with us today. And I am Marjorie Molina. I am a council member on Charlotte City Council. I'm a native North Carolinian, and like many of you in the room, I am absolutely passionate about the subject and why we're here today. I'm a mom. I have 2 children. I am a sister. I am a friend. And I walk my talk. I live this day in and day out. I balance being a working mother, a leading professional, and I have personally experienced the barriers. And so, it's one thing to say that we're informing policy from an abstract state of being, but when I wake up in the morning and before I go to a business meeting, I have to go sit in a car rider line, then that's a little bit different in understanding what it means to balance some of the responsibilities of being both a woman and a professional. And so that is my mainstay, and it leads to every other thing that I'm passionate about that often is inextricably tied to making space for women in work and otherwise. So that's why I'm here. I'm delighted to be here. And thank you all for joining us today.
Good afternoon. I am Tracy Newkirk. I am the co-founder and president of Genesis Block, along with my husband, Gerard Newkirk. And I was thrilled when I was asked to be on this panel. First of all, I represent entrepreneurs and in that small business space, that micro and small business space. And so to have our voice in the room when we're talking about workplace and rights and equality for women in that space is just so important to me. We started Genesis Block with a mission to help small, local, and diverse-owned businesses take their ideals from ideation to commercialization. And so in the 5 years, just about 5 years that we've been doing it, we have a Block Academy where we teach we have a Jumpstart Academy where we teach them how to go from the validate their business idea. We have an incubator validating their business model. We have a food incubator that helps food entrepreneurs get their ventures to market. And then we also have a technology platform where we can connect them to small businesses to larger contracting opportunities. And so we were doing this work, and then we looked up and realized 80% of the businesses we support are women founded businesses. And so when I do the research and I looked at all the information, a lot of the challenges that we see in the national reports, we live and face those challenges every day. So to have an opportunity to share and validate that it is truth. We are working with these women businesses every day, and to be able to validate that. And I was one of those women that left corporate America and started my own business, and was looking for some of the resources and services that we're speaking about today that was not there when I left my business. So to be able to share now is really important to me.
Thank you, Tracy. So I have a quick announcement. Is Linda Coleman in the room by chance? Okay, she's out. Perfect. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Von Hafen. I serve in the state legislature. My district's here in Wake County. I'm in my third term in the legislature, but I'm really honored to, again, be a part of this great panel, and I've gotten to know a lot of the women on some of our calls. So I think for me, like, just women's equality is something that I've focused my policy work on since I started the legislature. It's really what led me for okay. It's really what led me to run for office. In 2018, I was part of like a large group of women at that year to run for office. It was kind of a response to who won our presidency in 2016. I was at the Women's March in 2017 in DC, and just like the enthusiasm and like I think I kind of considered it an awakening in a way of women in this country, to say like, we absolutely have to be part of the people at the table. And I resonated with a lot of what you said, because as a mom myself of 3 kids, sitting in the carpool line, going to my annual OBGYN appointments, all the things, it really makes me realize every day when I'm in the legislature how important the representation of women there are, because we're talking about things in the legislature that are not important. And honestly, they're very male-centric issues. I think about just this past session, we spent a whole lot of time, y'all, on sports betting. And guess who was running those bills? It was all men, mostly men. I won't say all, but, and I just think if we spend as much time legalizing sports betting, as we do on, making sure that moms aren't dying in childbirth, just think about the difference that we could make in the state for women. And so I've really centered my policy work both on, one, we're one of the last states in the entire country. We have still not ratified the ERA in North Carolina. And it's been, decades since that was introduced. So we're still working on that. Childcare, reproductive rights, equal pay, all these things are things that I work on. So I'm just honored to be here too, to talk about that.
Hi. Okay. Yeah, my name is Anna Pardo. Oh gosh, how did I get into this work? I was radicalized as the oldest daughter of a single mother. I grew up on food stamps in rural North Carolina, also a North Carolina native. Although because I was a military brat, I was technically born in Texas. You can do the math. Yeah, 5 of my 7 siblings. No, I'm sorry. 4 of my 7 siblings are women, beautiful, wonderful, amazing women doing stuff in the world now. And I was raised by a single mom. And most of the people who remained in my family throughout my childhood and my young adulthood were the women. So I watched them. I watched how my mom struggled trying to find decent jobs. I watched the ways in which she was sort of stepped on for opportunities and excluded from opportunities. There was a while for when I was younger where she was a handy woman, and that was a real experience, a front row seat to watching how people treat women who are trying to break out of women's work. Um, so yeah, I think, that was sort of a crucible that informed the things that are important to me. Also, as a mixed race Latina, also very radicalizing experience growing up in Lincoln County, North Carolina. All right. Okay. We got somebody here. Cool. You made it out. Congratulations. Okay. We got to talk. Yeah, I've been an organizer since I could walk and talk. I think because of those experiences, I always had a very strong and deep affection for justice, a desire for justice for every single one of us. It's something that stirs me even when I'm sitting here talking to you in a professional capacity. Yeah, it's also rooted in my this is weird to talk about. I don't necessarily identify as Christian, but I was raised that way. And I took those lessons very seriously about what our job is here on earth, and what our duty is to each other. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Awesome. So I've been tasked with like context setting, right? And then I'm looking at my time and then I'm looking at the questions I want to get to. So I will say the context has already been set. Sorry. I think we heard that this morning when Secretary Cashwell began the day off for us talking about pay equity and all the inequities that women have faced. And I think that continued along throughout the day. And then during lunch, we heard from Governor Cooper, who said, hey, look, this is the progress that has been made to date, but there still is a lot more that needs to be done. So that's our context for the conversation. So I want to really just go ahead and dive into our first question, which is, and I want to address this essentially to Anna, what challenges do women face in today's workplace, and what is the impact of these challenges?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say that a lot of it boils down to, well, we can start with that chart right there. So this chart is from the 2013 State of Working Women report. My team at the North Carolina Justice Center publishes the State of Working North Carolina report every year with a different theme. Our next report, the cost of inaction, is coming out tomorrow morning. Hope you'll read it. I'll be citing some of the statistics from that upcoming report as well. But this chart is very interesting. It shows you what we refer to as occupational segregation. And occupational segregation is basically when people are shunted into different types of work because of their gender, their sexual orientation, their class, their race, these other things, their immigration status. So this is gender occupational segregation. And what we can see is that there are clearly some jobs that are considered women's work, and then there are some jobs that aren't. And there's another chart, if you wouldn't mind switching. Yeah, I love this chart, not because it's good news, but because, as I was joking earlier, is news we can use. This is a chart that says a whole lot about what it means for women to be segregated in the workforce. And it also shows that no matter how much of a percentage of a particular industry is worked by women, they're still going to make less than men. Look at that chart. So the blue dots represent men. The size of the dots indicate how much of the industry is occupied by male workers versus female workers. In almost every industry, you will see that even when men are vastly underrepresented in an industry, they're still getting paid more than their female counterparts. There are very few exceptions, and I think the only one on this chart, actually, there's personal care and service, and then there's computer and mathematical science, which is a relatively new development. All of the efforts that have, to me, right there, you see that chart, women are making more than men in STEM field. That is a new development. That was not true when I was at NC State for computer science 20 years ago. So the STEM work has been working, and that's the thing I want to mention is that our interventions have worked. So we need to keep doing it.
Awesome.
I could say more.
Nope, I want to go ahead and toss it and keep the conversation. So Representative Von Hafen, if you'd like to chime in a little bit with regards to challenges that women are facing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just briefly, we've already heard this morning about the challenges of childcare, and that's something that I work on a lot in the legislature. It affected me personally. I'm a lawyer, but when I had my first kid, I decided, why am I going to pay for childcare? It's probably going to be more expensive than what I was making at the time. And then I had two more, and it was a no-brainer because I'm like, I'm going to have to pay for 3 kids in childcare. And there was just no possible way. Luckily, I had the ability to stay home, but obviously we know so many women don't have that choice. So we've heard a little bit this morning in the plenaries about, the challenges of childcare right now. And we know that this was an issue before the pandemic, but I will say that the pandemic shone a light on it, and it's getting so much more attention, which I'm really, really happy about. But unfortunately, in the legislature, we have not done nearly enough to address it. Governor Cooper mentioned, in this short session budget, we did do a Band-Aid, I would call it, but it is nowhere near what we need. And we know that when childcare is not affordable and accessible, women leave the workforce, and we have a lot of data to support that. And so it's just something we've got to continue to work on, and we've got to continue to elevate that conversation. And again, that's where women representation in political office makes a huge difference.
Thank you. And so Tracy, from the perspective of an entrepreneur, if you could lean into that one some.
And so when you're thinking about the challenges, a lot of them aren't so different from what you experience in the workforce, the overall workforce. But I will tell you what we see, the top 3 that we see when we're working with women-owned businesses. And it was funny because I saw them in a lot of the reports and the annual reports that came out. The top 3 that we saw were we started with, and this is number 1 across the board, is access to capital and good and funding products. That financial products, especially in that micro to small business space, there's a gap in that there are not a lot of banks or funding products out there to fund micro businesses. And a lot of women are solopreneurs, and they sit in that space where they still need support. They need funding, but there are not a lot of products, and the products out there a lot of times can be predatory lending products. And so just being mindful and more legislation around supporting in that space. And then we have our second one is women getting contracts. And the federal government, I think I looked at it, is $59 billion, I think, that comes out a year that they put out. So imagine how that could change a women-owned business. And so we get calls constantly. How can I get my certification? So even because the process is arduous. And unfortunately, we live in Wilmington, the only city in the country that's had a successful coup d'etat, and we don't have a local certification person in our community that can help. So we have to send them to Raleigh or somewhere else to get that help that they need. But we get a lot of support from the NCDOA and NCDOT to help with that. But it's still, so even then, we help them get their certification. Then it's like, now what? How do I do a bid? How do I do a proposal? What are the services that help them? I've got this now, but I don't even know how to write a proposal. So where do I go from there? And then I got the contract, and now I need to increase my capacity to handle that contract. Where do I go get funding and capital? So those are in that whole increased contracting space and getting larger contracts. Those are some of the issues that they see. And then just like what she was saying, the third one is women are taking care of their children and they're taking care of their parents. And so that the wraparound services that are needed for that, I have a top-notch lady running a financial consulting firm right now, and she is swamped under with a terminal cancer diagnosis for her mom, and watching her trying to run a business and take care of that while she's also sending kids off to college and things. So those are some things, that personal side of wraparound care. But the other wraparound services that I see that is a challenge for women-owned businesses are the incubator and accelerator services that give them the technical skills that can take them from ideation to commercialization. that you see it for the big technology companies. There's always there, the VCs are there and all this support. But where's the support for those micro businesses that bring the livability to your community, the culture, the community in your community? They're not getting that same level of support.
Yep. Awesome. And Councilmember Molina, as I think about not just a woman of color, but then that immigrant population, could you share a little bit about the challenges that are happening there?
Yeah, thank you. So it's twofold. First of all, you ladies have said some outstanding answers. From a municipal level, I can see where all of this ties together. So understanding that, there are and our differences, we're more alike than we are different, regardless of where we are racially, ethnically, culturally. I just so happen to, in Charlotte, represent one of the most diverse districts in the city of Charlotte. And so we have more international representation in my particular district than any other place in the city of Charlotte, with the second largest being Spanish speaking Latinos. I am also Spanish speaking. I speak Spanish as a second language. But you know, the access to capital is something that is major. And I am proud to say that the city of Charlotte is being absolutely intentional about our small business owners. I, as a small business owner since 2007, actually, that's where I got my start. My ex-husband and I, we were forced to start a business because he couldn't go get a job anywhere. So we became small business owners by need. It was an absolute need. And by the time we started to have children, I, like you, was faced with the challenge of the cost of childcare. What did that mean for my family? And how would that cost impact us as far as how we could, provide for our family? And it became, uh, uh, it became a decision that wasn't even something that we decided on voluntarily. It was something that we had to do for you know, um, my career ambitions to take a back seat, unfortunately. And I know that many women face that same challenge. And a lot of women who can't afford to be in the workforce as a result of being a mother, then they become entrepreneurs to try to add value to create impact financially for the family. So I mean, there's so many things that are tied, but also I want to inject and say, as a municipal leader, the things that we can do at the municipal level, those are things where affordable housing right now, the city of Charlotte in particular has a $50 million housing bond where we partner with the private sector to offer affordable housing options. And in our last budget, we increased that potential impact to $100 million to be able to, offer substantial resources to, unfortunately, the people who need those resources oftentimes in a majority fashion are women, and they're single women with children. And so intentionally and both unintentionally, we are creating impact for women as a resource by creating affordable housing options. Transportation. I'm the vice chair of the Transportation and Development Committee for the City of Charlotte. Transportation is a substantial barrier for women of all races and ethnic backgrounds to get to work or get to a doctor's appointment or get to the places that we need to go. And these are the things at a municipal level that your municipal leaders can, impact from a policy perspective to make, access more available to women of all backgrounds. And in particular, women of color who experience this, unfortunately, at a higher impact than any other demographic. So.
Awesome. So I want to segue a little bit. So Anna, I'm putting you on the spot. The report will drop tomorrow. And so the second question, because I know that there's some new data that probably substantiates this, how could workplace equity policies such as equal pay and anti-discrimination measures influence the future opportunities and career aspirations? And I have young girls, but now I'm thinking young girls who ultimately become women.
So our report didn't actually go this year. We didn't go into equal pay or anti-discrimination legislation, but those are a piece of the bigger puzzle. I think one of the things that I would highlight from the report that's coming out tomorrow is we have with us someone from the USDOL Women's Bureau, and we borrowed from their reports of analysis. If you haven't met Marlena Guillaume, you need to. She's sitting here on the second row. But basically there's a staggering cost associated with it. And I would like to pose that cost as also an opportunity. The combined impact of the lack of affordable and accessible childcare, the lack of paid family and medical leave, the lack of paid sick days and other caregiver support, safe time for survivors, the combined impact of that to North Carolina's economy, the workforce attrition that is happening to women is $20 billion annually. 20 billion with a B. So I think it's a roundabout way of answering this question. I think that it's not just how those policies would impact women and girls who will become women. It's also how it's going to impact the rest of us, our businesses, our city's tax base, and our state's economy. So yeah, I think, paid leave and paid sick and childcare are the things that I am most versed in. And the implications of having access to those things would be radical. The reason that women are often the ones stepping back from work when children come into the picture is because they're often the ones making less. It's a financial decision. And a lot of single moms don't even get that choice, right? So, the occupational segregation stuff that I highlighted earlier, the gender pay gap that I highlighted earlier, which gets bigger and bigger depending on what race you belong to as a woman. Those are all factors in women's workforce attrition. They're all things that hold women back. Having access to policies that allow women to actually be on an equal playing field at work, not be expected culturally to completely take on all caregiving duties in our family. We're doing 80-something% of that work, y'all. And we're half the workforce. It is time for it to end. That has to change.
Oh. I'm over here like, yes.
Yeah. And so, Tracy, I want to give you an opportunity as well to just breathe into that space as you think about entrepreneurship.
So when I think of entrepreneurship and young girls, I always think of early exposure. How do we get them engaged? And so the two areas that I look at are high growth areas and high wage areas. And so when she said women are making more in STEM, I think that we have to give them early exposure to STEM jobs and give them the confidence that they can do them just as well as anyone else. Better than, thank you, I will take that. And then the second part is our trades jobs. And I'm so thankful for organizations like the PWB, Professional Women Builders, and NAWIC, National Association of Women in Construction, because we giving our young girls the opportunity to see themselves in those type roles. And then we have to give them that early exposure, and then we have to create the support systems that support them going into them. And that's where I come back to having the incubators and the accelerators where they can get an idea and they can come in that space, and a safe space around other women that are doing it and other young girls that are interested in it, and they can build out their ideas. They can share. My husband always says this to me: you can never underestimate the value of knowledge sharing and information spillover and knowledge sharing, because in those type spaces, that's where some of the best ideas come from. And having them not just for high-tech companies, but having them for our mainstream, our STEM and our trades are going to be so important that we stand up those type incubators, and that will give greater pay equity for our young girls coming out of school.
Awesome. So I want to direct the next question to both Representative Von Hafen and Councilmember Molina. What role should policymakers and local government play in addressing just workplace inequities that women are facing today?
It's okay. Just because I want to dovetail off what you said, because everything that you said about being an example for girls in business is the same in political representation and elected office and serving on boards and commissions, and having them see, women like us in office is really, really powerful. So I just wanted to add on to what you said. It's not just about business. But I would say, like, at least the role of like a state government, we have a huge role in making sure that women, have equal opportunities. And I mean, some of the charts up there about, like the disparities in pay. And I think especially about our childcare workers, dovetailing off of my childcare policy work, is that like 95% of women or 95% of childcare teachers and early education teachers are women, and mostly women of color. And right now in North Carolina, the average childcare early education teacher makes $12 an hour. $12 an hour to do one of the most important jobs in this world. And that because we know that children 0 to 5 are like, they're soaking up that all the brain science shows that that is the most important period for child development and education. And the fact that we are paying them that is honestly like disgusting and a travesty, and is what keeps me up at night and keeps me working, because women carry that burden, and they always have, as caregivers, as nurturers. But we have to make sure that we're looking at them as professionals. I do not call them childcare workers. They are teachers. They are teachers. So we have to change like the narrative. We have to change the way that we talk about that profession, that they're not just watching your kids, they're teaching them. And so please, if you have kids in childcare or early education settings, please call them teachers, please call them educators, because that's what they are. And I think that as a state policymaker, we can do so much to both, increase their pay, because it's very necessary. We have a lot of state programs that we can be investing in to increase their pay. We can work on childcare subsidy. We can work on federal grant programs. I mean, the list goes on, and I won't have time for all of that. But I will also say that we have got to increase our minimum wage in North Carolina. It is crazy that, we still have such a low minimum wage and a tipped wage. So I just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah, I want to chime in because I say the same thing, that it is unfathomable that we have not increased the minimum wage. And I want to live, because I know what's happening in Charlotte because I'm there. Just the move to ensure that companies are doing that, but there's so much more that can be done in that area.
Absolutely. And Fontella, you bring up a good point. But before I go there, yes, and yes, and yes, right? Like, it's great to be on a panel when the synergy is just like, yeah, what she said. Oh God, what she said too, like seriously. So first of all, I'll start by, especially from the state level, we are blessed to have Governor Roy Cooper. I have been in the room, right? We are so blessed to have Governor Roy Cooper. Everybody love Uncle Roy, right? Because I have been in a room in more schools with Uncle Roy than any other place. He'll call my office, and his staff will be like, "Hey, we coming to Charlotte. We're gonna come to this school," because I have never seen somebody fight harder for educators and teacher pay in my life than Governor Roy Cooper. So, and it's so sad because our teachers are some of the lowest paid in the southern states, right? So, I mean, you're talking about our teachers are leaving the state of North Carolina. We have more than a 1,000 teacher shortage across our state of teachers, something that is so substantial to our future. This particular profession is severely suffering. So shout out to all that you're doing at the state level. I want to, just lift that up. I think it's great. At a municipal level. So the way that I like to, because look, a lot of us, when it comes to civics and education, I'll have someone call me with a county deliverable or a state deliverable, not really understanding in what lane we operate and what the capacity of our work is, right? And so the way that I like to look at it is, at the state level, you pretty much have everything. At the city level, we have what you call a charter that governs us, that's actually given to us by our state. At the state constitutional level, every city in the entire 100 county spectrum that is the state of North Carolina has a charter, and those charters govern what your municipal government can and cannot do, right? And that charter gives us this bandwidth to make decisions. So it may not be a statewide, minimum wage that we could attack, but your hard services that depend on your everyday life, whether your roads are paved, whether there are affordable, opportunities, whether, there are thriving businesses with living wages in your city. Those are things that at a municipal level, every single city in here has the capacity to do that at some level. I have the honor of serving as on the board of directors for the North Carolina League of Municipalities. So that is representing every single city in the state of North Carolina at the state level for deliverables that are important to every city, big and small, across our state. And so as a policy legislative committee member, I get to hear a lot of what impacts our cities. And there's a diversity in our cities. We have more small cities than we do big cities. And a lot of the time when I come in as Charlotte, right? Charlotte, big bad county of Mecklenburg, things like that, because it is a conglomerate of a place, but we're the exception. We're not the rule, right? The cities across our state are a majority less than 50,000 people, right? But what I found in every single room that I sit at a North Carolina League of Municipalities opportunity is that our problems are the same. The difference is scale, right? The scale of our problems are what the diversity is. The amount of money that we have to allocate because there being a higher amount of human beings that we represent is the biggest difference that I see. And so what I would encourage you, and I love Dr. Adams. I'm from High Point, North Carolina. And so I've watched her my entire life grow through her leadership journey for my lifetime, literally. But she said something this morning that I thought was very important, and I'll end with this. We decide who represents us. Right? It is 100% our duty to decide at every level of government who represents us. And we have the ability to make that change if we find that it's not what we would like for it to be. I hear people say, oh, politicians this, politicians that, but there's an inextricable nature to that exchange in that the policymakers that sit in seats are the direct result of who is being voted for. And so when we don't like what we see, it is our responsibility to change that by way of our vote or even stepping up, especially as women, to run for office. And I'll end there.
And I think that takes us into, I guess everybody snap, but that takes us into the last question, right? Which is a great segue. What can we do as women? What's the action and the call to action for us as women? And I want to give every panelist an opportunity to speak to that. So Anna, we can start with you, if you'd like.
First of all, thank you for mentioning the minimum wage. I feel really remiss as like the labor advocate in this space.
You didn't mention.
I was too busy talking about gender occupational segregation. So I just want to name that it is an absolute fact that women are overrepresented in the low wage work in this state. Women of color in particular, Black and brown women, Latino women, immigrant women from all over are way overrepresented in the lower end of the wage spectrum in our state. So raising the minimum wage would have a disproportionate benefit to them, and we should advocate for that. Every single person in this room should be, especially if you're a business owner. I'm gonna leave that there. Oh man, okay, what can we do? The thing that I think I was gonna just try to drill home is women are organizing in our state. There's a lot of new organizing energy since the start of the pandemic. Women are the tip of the spear in new unionization in North Carolina. And I don't think it's just here, but it's definitely happening here. So union rates, y'all may have seen this in the news over the last 20 years, like they've been steadily sort of slowly declining. Unionization rates among women are rising in North Carolina. And unions are not imperfect institutions by far. But what I will say is that they are the surest way to close the wage gap based on gender and race, to ensure that you have rights in your workplace. You got a contract. My workplace is organized. Yours should be too. And you should, if you are not in a place where you could be part of it, if you are an entrepreneur, a sole operator, owner, support unionized businesses, support union efforts to organize different places. I can't say what I was about to say. I can't tell you how to boycott anybody. But yeah, for example, there is an ongoing effort in North Carolina to organize Amazon fulfillment center facilities. I spoke with a lady who works at one here at the one in Garner, and she is 70 years old. She's still working. Thank you to the degradation of wages since 1970 that she doesn't make enough for her Social Security earnings to be able to retire. She's 70, y'all. She deserves to rest. Her name is Mary, and she's amazing. she's the star of our report, in my opinion. Yeah, support women like Mary Hill, who are trying to organize so that they have some rights and some peace. And that's all I'll say.
And so I want to remind everyone that we gave you an opportunity to write questions down. And so if you have questions, just raise your cards and they'll come around and gather them, because I'm surprised, but we actually have time, the 15 minutes that we've allotted for Q&A. All right, Representative Von Haven.
Of course, like I've said a couple of times, I'm just such a strong believer in representation in office, but I know not everybody can run for office, especially running for the state legislature. It is extremely challenging. I make $13,000 a year for basically a full-time position. Then I'm at the beck and call of a bunch of men who don't have kids and families. I can't plan family vacations. I can't plan pickups from school. I can't afford anything because I make under living wage basically. So it's kind of ironic that like we make a horrible salary and we're not raising the minimum wage anyway. But anyway, so I know not everybody can run for office, so I want to call back to the DNC because Michelle Obama said it best: do something. Do something. We've talked a lot about the election this year because it's only 69 days away, or it's like so quick, y'all. And so that's a lot on top of mind for a lot of people, including myself, who's running right now. So I'm not going to go into like vote. We all know we've got to vote. We all know that, electing the people that we want to see in office is extremely important. We all know that childcare is on the ballot. We all know that reproductive rights are on the ballot, equal pay, the ERA, all these things are on the ballot, right? We all know that. So what can you do? Do something. I would say that if you don't want to get out and knock doors and you don't want to do all the things, the best thing that you can do is literally just talk to your friends and family. And it has a fancy name. It's called relational organizing, but it's just literally talking to people. And so a lot of people feel like to be active in politics, you have to like go knock doors or go to the DNC or like all these things. But it's literally like you can go home tonight and like call a friend and be like, oh my God, I went to this amazing conference today. And did you know that childcare workers only make $12 an hour? Isn't that crazy? Oh, I just said childcare workers. Whoops. Educators only make $12 an hour, and just like these conversations then spur the next conversation. Oh, and then did you know the legislature hasn't raised the minimum wage in, how long? 30 years, 16 years. Yeah. So, I mean, just these little things can spur conversations with people. And that makes a huge, huge difference. You wouldn't believe how many people I knock on their door and I say, are you going to vote this year? And they were like, oh, there's an election coming up. It's shocking, you all, because being in politics, like I'm immersed in it, right? Like we're always talking about it. It's like I'm in this bubble, but when I get out of the bubble, it's really surprising. So just having that one conversation is the way that you can do something.
So mine will be very brief because I started with it and I'll end with it. The number one thing I think any of us can do is always advocate for those financial products that are in that gap space between micro businesses and small businesses, because that is the majority of where a lot of our women businesses sit. And we have to be able to get them the financial products that they need to scale the way they desire. Everybody doesn't want $1 million business. Everybody doesn't want VCs that are going to buy it out and 10X it and all that, but they still want to be able to make a good wage and have a quality business. And so mine is that whole gap space for the financial product.
What they said. Okay. No. I think I'll come back to the same thing, right? Again, Representative Von Haven and I, we definitely are in that same bubble, right? We understand what it means to be politically engaged, and whether we concede to it or not, everything that affects our daily lives are being informed by somebody who has the ability to create a policy. Right. And so actually, it was funny because on my way here this morning, I saw something and I screenshot it. And I didn't even fact check it. I just screenshot it because it said it was talking about hold on, what did it say? I want to make sure I don't misquote it. But basically, it was if here it goes. One of the penalties of refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And Plato said that. Imagine like this was, and I saw it this morning. I was kind of scrolling, mindlessly, and that is what my call to action would be, right? And the truth of the matter is there is an election in the state of North Carolina every single year. Right? Most people are only engaged in the presidential election every 4 years, but every year you are electing somebody, whether that be your judges, whether that be your sheriff, whether that be, your county government, your city government, your state elected officials, your federal officials. You are electing someone every single November. That is the best rule of thumb that I can give you. So make sure that every single year you're looking for who is on your ballot, because in those off election years, there's someone being elected who is going to decide and approve the budget for your city, that decides whether you get roads, whether you get lights, whether the people who work in your city get a raise. They're going to decide a whole lot of things. And I know from experience, in most cities across our state experience this, those smaller, less publicized elections get dismal turnout. It is dismal, the amount of people who we elect at those times who get to make some of the most substantial decisions that affect our everyday lives. So I'll leave with that.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that I might add, what comes to mind for me, to whom much is given, much is required. And so then the question that I would toss out is, what are you going to do with the information that you heard today? That's it. All right. Who is responsible for wages to be increased in each industry? Like to grapple with
I
that
can
one.
take that one. So employers in any industry can voluntarily increase their wage. And that has happened. We have a patchwork, and the same is true of other benefit policies like paid family medical leave, paid sick days. When you rely on, it's great, it's wonderful. That's the first thing I'm going to say. It's great and wonderful when businesses voluntarily decide to raise their wage or to provide paid sick days, or some of them even provide on-site childcare. That's wonderful. You should not, I'm gonna borrow a line from one of my dear friends here in the audience, you should not have to win the boss lottery to have a decent basic quality of life. And that includes your wages. What that means is the responsibility in our state, if it doesn't rest with Congress, if Congress doesn't act to raise the wage again, it rests with our state legislature. And there have been efforts, y'all. Some of the people in this room have been involved in the efforts to try to implement an increase to our state minimum wage, phase out the tipped minimum wage, eliminate sub-minimum wages for, did y'all know that it's legal to pay less than minimum wage? Well, first of all, tip workers make less than minimum wage, and that is somehow still legal. But it's also possible to pay people with intellectual and physical disabilities and people who are incarcerated less than minimum wage. That needs to end. And so, yeah, we're really looking to our General Assembly, which is why it's important to vote.
And so this next one's not really a question, but I'm going to affirm it. So if you have questions about anything connected to paid sick leave, all of the above, talk to Anna. All right, Representative Von Hafen, we've heard a lot about the impact of voting. Can you speak briefly about gerrymandering?
Okay. So in North Carolina, unfortunately, the ability to draw the lines for our congressional and our legislative districts sits with the General Assembly. For many years, we've been trying to get what's called an independent redistricting commission, which is a lot of states have that, where they take that power out of the hands of politicians. Wow, novel idea, and put it in a neutral body that is not directly affected by those decisions. But as you might guess, the people in power don't want that to happen, because they want that power in order to keep the power. And what we've been going through, over the last 10, 15 years is a series of lawsuits. So every time the legislature draws new maps, they get challenged, right? Because either people are disenfranchised or different, voters will sue on behalf of Black voters or women voters or whatever it might be. And then it goes to the Supreme Court in North Carolina. They make they make a decision. Some of them have gone to the federal courts. And it just keeps going back and forth. So for an example, I first ran for office in 2018. And literally the reason I ran was because of gerrymandering, because two candidates that were going to run for the seat I hold now were gerrymandered out of their district, meaning they drew the lines right around their houses because the guy in power knew that he was going to run against them. And so then my party didn't have a candidate, and I kind of got in the race last minute. Okay, so I'm running for my 4th term. Every time I've run in a different draw of my district. Every time. I mean, isn't that crazy to think about how voters don't even know who their representative is? They don't know who they're voting for. Every time I run, I have to reintroduce myself to a whole new set of people. So this is just a perfect example of why gerrymandering is so harmful to voters, why redistricting should be out of the hands of politicians, and why they should have no influence over what people they're representing, because right now they're picking their voters instead of voters picking them.
Awesome. So this next question, I'm going to try and just dissect some aspects. We got 5 minutes. So Anna, I want to direct this one towards you, and because you the workers' rights space, human trafficking, sexual assault, and domestic violence survivors. How do we assist them and bridge gaps in work history because of forced criminal activity or absence when they try to get work?
That is complex. And to be honest, I have colleagues at the Justice Center who would be way better prepared to answer that question. I mean, I would say, I don't know how we address gaps in work. I mean, I think that it is important for women who are coming out of those situations to be supported. I hope that there are institutional supports. It's not my world. But certainly making sure that when they do get a job, they're protected against wage theft. They're protected against sexual or gender-based discrimination. They're going to make a living wage. They're going to have access to the things that they need to make it for their families. Those things all help stabilize any single one of us. And certainly somebody who's coming out of a situation like that will benefit from it as well. Sorry for the tepid answer.
I just want to add,
Yes.
we've heard a lot today that North Carolina is one of the best states for business in the country. It is one of the worst states for workers in the country. So just to be really honest about it, we are not good for workers.
Yeah.
And so if you want to learn more about what the Justice Center is doing, they are an amazing organization. I know we could get into that whole conversation.
Can I make a shameless plug?
Oh, go ahead.
My colleague from Braxton Winston is running for labor commissioner. I know Braxton. Braxton's a great guy, a union guy, and I don't know what side of the policy spectrum anybody, but we have choices. I just want to put that shameless plug in there.
I also, if it's okay, I'd like to just clarify that we have been ranked for the 5th year in a row now, and it will come out tomorrow, that North Carolina is dead last among all of the United States for working people, particularly for working women.
A part of me wants to leave it there. I know I got 1 minute, and I want to squeeze this one in because it's relevant. And I think, we know there's been this mass exodus from corporate America, women leaving the workplace. And so the question really is, are they leaving and choosing entrepreneurship as a path?
We are seeing that. And there was a SCORE did a report, and there was another report done that I read recently where a lot of women that have left because of culture and they're taking their professional skill sets, they're starting their own companies to come back in from the outside to try to fix the things that they saw while they were in corporate America.
All right, I am proud. We got it all in. You have been an amazing audience. Thank you, Councilman Molina, Tracy, Representative Von Hafen, and Anna. Check out the report. I will tell you that every time that report is dropped, I think in 2023, when I saw Oxfam say we were dead last, and then they came back and drilled in even deeper, But I also want to remind you, check out the council's reports. What's scary about that data is that the data is still relevant. Even though those studies were done back in 2019 and 2020, the content is still relevant to the struggle that we are facing as women. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.